So welcome to our guest speaker lecture on lessons from the field with regards to the practice of nonviolent action. Today we are joined by Jason Miller, who is the director of campaign and development of the Franciscan Action Network. He has had quite a lot of experience in the field, ranging from smaller to bigger actions. So there's a lot to learn from him. And he will be giving a talk. I had some questions for him, so he'll be answering those as well. And then you guys will have the chance to provide some questions and get some answers. Sounds good? Without further ado, thank you so much, Jason, for joining us today. And I'll let you take the lead. Shall I start the PowerPoint?
Thank you so much for having me. Yes, please do. And let's start with the video.
This is a moment when all of us are called to rise above what divides us.
To rise above what divides us and come together.
Not just the migrant, not just the person of color, but all of us together.
I think one of the greatest sins in our age is the sin of separation. Separation leads to isolation. It kills hope. It stifles people and is destructive.
I think good leaders ultimately are servants. They're not masters. It's not about being a VIP.
Those who serve must be servants to all, not to a privileged few.
And a good public servant listens and acts with compassion for the whole group, not just some, but everybody.
As a mother, I look for politicians that can serve as role models for my two children.
I want morality in my leaders, people that have integrity, that have honesty, that tell us the truth, even when the truth is a hard thing for us to hear.
We need people with principles. This is not a time to be doing things because it'll get someone more power or more money.
We need elected officials to lead with morality, compassion, and integrity.
Voting is a first step.
I think people are awakening to the fact that the vote is such a sacred thing.
We have the ability to choose who speaks for us.
By voting our values, our nation can get back on a path that leads to respect for all.
Where I have my hope is in the people. Is in the people, sincerely.
The election in November matters. There are so many wrongs that need to be righted. But how do we right them? We vote.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I am so honored to be with all of you today. And I hope you enjoyed that video from my organization, the Franciscan Action Network. And perhaps you even watched the other two that your professor sent ahead of the class. Maybe not. If not, that's okay. But I'm going to talk to you today about what we've learned in 2020 in terms of nonviolent resistance in a pandemic world and in a time when lots of people are out on the streets advocating for racial justice. But first, who am I? My name is Jason Miller. I'm the Director of Campaigns and Development at the Franciscan Action Network. I'm a faith-based advocate, organizer, and activist. You're saying, well, what is the Franciscan Action Network? Well, perhaps you've heard of the Franciscans, those Catholic priests and nuns, the guys in the brown robes. You saw some of them in the video. We represent about 55 different Franciscan institutions nationwide, and we advocate on a wide variety of issues in Washington, D.C., where I'm based, on everything ranging from the environment to immigration. I even lead a good governance interfaith coalition called Faithful Democracy, which you'll note there. And in my 7 years at FAN and beyond, I've taken part in a wide variety of actions on advocacy and campaigns around immigration, labor, campaign finance, the environment, including the People's Climate Movement, the Nuns on the Bus, and a wide variety of different campaigns and actions. So that's a little bit about who I am. Next slide, please. So I want to talk today, you've learned a lot about nonviolent movements in your last couple of classes and looked at some historical examples. Can anyone tell me some of the historical examples, maybe just in the chat, about what you've learned so far? Maybe the civil rights movements, other movements around the world, either past or present, that you've heard of. Can you offer some that you've talked about so far? Freedom Riders, yep, definitely. Gandhi, sure. There's another one, I missed it in the chat. Black Lives Matter. Oh, the Egyptian Revolution, yep, Okay, great. So you all have a sense then of when I talk about nonviolent resistance of what exactly that means. And so I wanted to give you a little bit of a on the ground of what's happening in DC and what we've learned this past year, and a time when it's certainly unique. We've heard lots of people say that, and it's unlike any other. But first, I want to recognize my privilege. Obviously, I'm a white cis male, and I recognize that it's in some ways easier for me to use my privilege and when the time calls for it, put my life on the line, as we've seen some folks do this summer. It's much easier for me to be on the front lines. And I recognize that as a white male, I might not have all the answers, but I try to learn and let other people, local folks in the community and BIPOC communities take the lead on lots of these actions and campaigns when possible. So what happened in DC this summer? Anybody, did you hear some headlines? Obviously there were racial justice protests all across the country. But did anybody hear about what specifically happened in DC? Can you type it in the chat about what you might have heard? Help if I open the chat. Any ideas? We certainly had lots of protests here locally in Washington. Yes, gassing protesters for Trump's photo op with a Bible. That's exactly how I would have described it. Yes, so talking both about that specific moment and the overall movement, right? So here in Washington, D.C., like a number of cities, there were some statues that came down, and I live right in the city. A lot of businesses were boarded up. Helicopters were flying overhead. There was a 9 p.m. curfew, and those helicopters for 2 nights flew overhead the entire night, really low. And there's actually an investigation now into why those helicopters were flying so low and for so long. So yes, and specifically, there was a clearing of peaceful protesters in front of the White House, right by a church, using the presidential administration claimed that it wasn't tear gas, but it was tear gas-like substances that essentially have the same effect. And they cleared out peaceful protesters just so that Trump could have his photo op with the Bible, which was pretty ridiculous to say the least. And that's, I never thought we'd reach a moment. I've heard others say, but I guess as a white man, I never thought that we would reach a moment in our country where we had a moment like that, where peaceful protesters were cleared out using force and violence to stage a photo op. So that's, and certainly everyone lots of folks heard about that and were outraged, and there's been ongoing protests in DC and throughout the country. But I think that really shows, what kind of a moment we're in with our nation less than 30 days from an election. And I'd like to, before we go any further, I'd love to hear what you thought about the video. Would you just have one word or phrase to describe what you thought about it, how you felt, how it made you feel? Could you share in the chat? Optimistic, that's good. Love to hear that. Powerful, hopeful, those are all wonderful. Empowering, that's great. I'm so glad to hear that. It's, we're a pretty small organization. We have about 4 full-time staff members in DC and a couple other part-time at Franciscan Action Network. But it's amazing what you can do with a little grant money and a professional studio and a nice script. And when you get some friends to be your actor in your videos. So those are on our social media channels, and I'm glad to hear, energizing. I'm glad to hear it, that people really liked those, because that's a lesson, again, that we learned in 2020. You hear a lot about hashtag activism and how folks are saying, well, you can't just start a hashtag. You need to do more than that. You need to actually act. And, our video is calling for folks to vote their conscience and to vote their Franciscan values. And you saw my cameo in the video, obviously the best part of the video. I'm sure you would all agree. And it's, I said, you have to do more than vote, right? Voting is a first step. And that's why I'm so glad to hear that, you're learning about nonviolent movements, and that hopefully I can, give you some additional ideas of what you can do besides just creating those hashtags and voting, because that's just the first step. But I think another important lesson before we go into what are some additional ideas you can do, you have to protect your mental health. That's especially important, and not just your mental health, but your physical health. There was some concern back in June when we had the racial justice protests about, would this cause a spread of COVID? And amazingly, all the reports that we've seen in the news are that, this didn't cause a spread. It wasn't a super spreader event, like say the motorcycle rally in South Dakota. It's all about, maintaining that social distance, wearing your mask, and keeping yourself safe. So certainly you want to keep your physical health safe, but also your mental health. And I say that as someone who has been especially anxious and stressed over these last few weeks. Perhaps you're feeling that way too. And it's important sometimes to know that, we're all doing what we can, but sometimes you have to take a step back and protect your mental health and know that others will be able to step up and take the lead. And so at bare minimum, if all you can do is vote, if all you can do is, share that Instagram post, that's okay. But, we're asking for those who can do more to do more, if at all possible. And another key component that we learned in 2020, we want to think locally, right? So some of you may be asking, well, how do we get engaged? But it's important always to listen to those doing the work in your community and let them take the lead. My partner has done some work with the Mutual Aid Network here in DC, which grew out of the pandemic. And it's really about assisting neighbors and helping those in need who might need food or other supplies during the pandemic. And the key part there is it's helping everybody in the community. It's helping the homeless. It's helping those who might not be homeless, but may have lost their job. But I just moved to the community myself a few months ago, and so I knew that it was important to let those who've been doing this work for years to take the lead. And we always have to remember that no matter what's action or campaign you're doing, make sure that you let those who are part of the community who've been doing the work for years take the lead. We already talked a little bit about the connection between racial justice protests and COVID. Amazingly and thankfully, we saw that those events did not cause a spread of COVID-19. And I think that really speaks to how committed people are to not just the movement and to nonviolence, but to also taking care of one another and their neighbors. And that's really important. And the last piece, we talked about protecting your mental health, and I've certainly had some anxiety over this. We're less than a month away from the election. What does a post-election scenario look like? What is our democracy in peril? Is it in trouble? And I think that it's certainly possible that no matter what happens on November 3rd, that we know that there could be multiple scenarios that could be unlike anything we've ever seen, similar to the peaceful protesters being tear gassed in front of the White House. We don't know what's going to happen on November 3rd, which is all to say to make sure that everyone is registered to vote, that you have a plan, that you talk to your friends about voting, and we do what we can to ensure that we have a peaceful transition of power. Next slide, please. So how can you practice nonviolent resistance? Like I said, there's lots of different things we can do. We've talked about social media. We've talked about voting. Because I am the co-facilitator of the Faithful Democracy Coalition, I'm just going to say this again. When you vote, make sure you have a plan to vote safely and securely, either in person or by mail. And, there's lots of questions as well around the post office. So if that means requesting your mail-in ballot and then dropping it off at a drop box, if possible, make sure you have a plan, and make sure you know the dates of when you can get the absentee ballot. And I'll say too, real quickly, that absentee ballots they're safe, they're secure. The Brennan Center for Justice has determined that despite what you might hear, you have a greater chance of being struck by lightning than anyone does committing voter fraud. So you can Google it. It's true. I promise. It's on the internet. It must be true. So how else can you practice nonviolent resistance? Well, first, before you advocate, and before the pandemic, my work at Franciscan Action Network, a piece of that was advocating for different pieces of legislation on Capitol Hill. Before you can advocate, you have to educate yourself and others, and that includes family and friends. If you're not familiar with what's going on, Google it, and then always check different sources to make sure what you're reading is accurate. So that's important, right? You need to, before you advocate, you need to educate yourself. And once you're educated about a particular topic, and I'm sure many of you are already interested in a variety of different things. I've heard that, the environment, about LGBTQ rights, all sorts of different things that your racial justice that you're involved in. And that's great. And it's important that, we all have members of Congress and they all work for us, right? So can you tell me in the chat, have you ever emailed or called or tweeted at either of your senators or your House member? I see one hand going up. Yeah, that's great. You have? Okay. Yes. I'm seeing lots of yeses. That's amazing. All right. That's great. And I'm sure that if you haven't, and you don't want to admit it, that's okay too. But I'm here to say that it's easy, right? We might not like picking up the phone, but what I like to do is to call my senators after 5 p.m. and that way you get a voicemail. So if there's a particular issue that you're concerned about, maybe you're concerned about, rather than the Senate trying to pass a COVID relief bill, they're trying to get through a Supreme Court justice nominee. Well, call your senators and let them know, because they're the ones that are going to be voting on it, that how you feel about that. I've done that, and I do it after 5 p.m. so I can leave a voicemail, and it makes it even easier. You don't even have to talk to a real person. Another thing you can do, right? You can take it to the streets. You can protest. As you may have seen the pictures in the About Me slide, that there's these days it's protesting, right, with a mask and at a safe social distance. But speaking up and speaking out and making sure your voice is heard is important. And if we're talking about nonviolent resistance, we're on the streets. That's when you want to use that Instagram handle of yours. That's when you want to use those hashtags and really lift up the work that you're doing and the work that others are doing to make sure your friends and family are aware of, these are the issues that you care about. And finally, I just wanted to add there, one of my favorites is to fast. And, perhaps when you learned about Gandhi, that, you learned that fasting was one of the things that he used, as it's a deeply spiritual practice. Cesar Chavez and the farm workers in California, fasting was something that they used as a tactic to gain attention to their cause and to the plight of farm workers. And I just wanted to add that on there, as I am a person of faith. And you might not be, and you might be too, or you might not be, and that's okay. But it's a tactic that we can all use as a way to gain attention to our cause. And it's a deeply spiritual one, and it's one that takes some real effort, but it can be rewarding. All right, next slide, please. So your professor gave me some questions that you provided to him about what you wanted me to answer, or what you wanted him to answer, and you're stuck with me about nonviolence. So let's start with some of these questions. And if you have questions too, put them in the chat. I would love to answer them, but hopefully these will get us started about and pique your interest. So how do you stay true to your mission but grow your base? That's a tricky one, right? I mentioned that we're made up of 55 different institutions. All of those institutions, Franciscan sisters and friars and priests and lay people, all make up those 55 institutions. And it's hard when in Catholic religious life, some of those institutions are starting to shrink, right? There aren't as many priests and nuns as there used to be. So what we want to do is reach out to as many people as possible, as Franciscan-hearted individuals. And that's through our email list, that's through social media, that's through the actions that we do. We're trying to gain press attention with press releases. So it's really just trying to lift up our mission and to grow our base at the same time. And that can be a challenge. But we know that, if we stay grounded in the examples of St. Francis and St. Clare, and use the example of people like Pope Francis, who you saw his quote in the video, we know that we're staying true to our mission. Do you use branding, symbols, songs, chants to indicate that you are part of a group? Yes, we do. Certainly, those Franciscans are known for wearing brown. And, often some of you may have participated in a protest, and there's always chants, right? There's chants that you use to indicate that you're part of a group. You come to your protest, you have a sign that say what you believe in, and that's how we recognize that we're part of a group. As a person of faith, as a Franciscan-hearted individual, I sometimes will wear a tau cross, which is a special sort of Franciscan cross that is used to indicate that I am part of the Franciscan Action Network and a Franciscan-hearted individual. Here's a good one. How do you respond to government repression? How does it attract more followers? Well, we do, as I say, live in a time when we don't know what's going to happen on November 3rd. I think we have to anticipate that, because of so many mail-in ballots, we might not know who the next president is going to be the night of, right? We're used to knowing right away. And we saw in DC, in Portland, in Louisville, the government is fighting back against peaceful protesters, right? And there's instances of violence. And again, your professor and I were talking, and we were talking about Hong Kong and what was going on there, and I didn't suspect that we would see something like that from the United States, and we had hoped that even though there's instances throughout our own history as a country where people have been repressed and movements have been put down by the government, that we hoped that certainly the peaceful protesters in front of the White House wouldn't be cleared out using tear gas, and yet here we are. That seems like an instance that would happen somewhere else, but not here in our country. And I think that we have to use that as a moment and realize that we might have to put ourselves on the line for democracy and for the future of our country. But hopefully it galvanizes and encourages others to do what they can to participate in the movement and to participate in nonviolent resistance. Does anybody have any questions before I continue to go through these that were provided me ahead of time? Just feel free to put them in the chat, and I'm happy to answer them about my own work, about any tactics. Otherwise, we'll just keep going through these. So how do you set goals? Well, at the Franciscan Action Network, that's hard, right? It's hard, especially in the era that we're living in a Trump administration, where it might feel like the house is on fire, and it might feel like I always say it's playing whack-a-mole, right? You knock something down and then it pops right back up. So it feels like it's hard to plan. And so when we're talking about goals, we really want to set small goals to help continue to bend the moral arc for justice, because it's hard. It's hard to measure success in our line of work, especially in these last few years. So, what we want to do is say, like with our video, if we, use that video to reach 250,000 people online, we would call that a success. And I heard today that we're at 180,000. So we're well on our way. And for us, that's a big deal. And that's a success, because it's letting folks know who we are and what our message is. And that's essentially how you set a goal, right? Is to educate before you can advocate. Here is a question in the chat. Thank you. What does the use of tear gas on citizens in the Capitol say about a government outside of the Trump administration? Well, that's a great question. Again, as I heard someone say on a call recently, that they always feared that there would be some sort of violence. They just didn't expect it to come from the president. And that's, it's shocking in that way, right? Like we in some ways, what we've seen with police brutality and in other cities, that's happened before in our history. But the clearing out of peaceful protesters by the federal government like that in front of the White House, that's certainly more unusual. We saw that in a place like Standing Rock, and that frankly was the Obama administration, and there's needs to be some criticism there too. But I think it shows that the Trump administration is willing to do anything to for cheap political gain, because the whole goal of that was to take the photo op and you know, he's willing to put lives at risk, and that's scary. I mean, we've seen some of the other things that he's done, and you know, certainly how he's treated, especially BIPOC communities right on the border with separating families. We're hearing those horrific reports now of forced hysterectomies at some private prisons. You know, so it's in some ways perhaps easier to get away with those horrific things if people aren't paying attention. But you know, when it's on the evening news, that's even more shocking. All right, so we got some more questions. That's great. How do you respond to those that use their religion as excuse to not advocate for issues that you deem important? That's a great question. You know, there's lots of religious folks who are one issue voters, or they believe that they might not believe what we believe, right? And on certain issues, you know, I believe that science is real and that climate change is happening, right? And as just one example, and I know there's lots of people of faith who might not believe that. And you know, in a way that's okay, because you know, we know that as we get older, not everybody agrees with us on every single issue. And you know, if people don't want to advocate on a particular issue, that's okay too. We would just hope that, you know, we can educate them, and you know, and it might not change their mind, but at least it gets them to think, right? And again, I'll use the environment as an example. You know, there's Pope Francis issued a wonderful encyclical about 5 years ago, a papal document called Laudato Si, which was specifically on the environment. And, you know, something like 30% of American Catholics have only heard about Laudato Si, let alone have read it. So that means that, you know, as a Catholic advocate, clearly I've failed on that front, because, you know, my people, Catholics and Franciscan-hearted individuals aren't reading Laudato Si. So clearly I have some more work to do on that. And so that's what I would say to those who use religion in that way, right? We need to do more education, and hopefully we can get a few of those folks to educate themselves and to begin to change their minds. Okay, next question. How do you make people care? I've heard a lot of people say they just don't want to vote at all. Well, yeah, that can be a hard one, right? Perhaps there is a lot of apathy, and there's, for me, it's a lot of fear and anxiety too, and sometimes you wonder, well, you know, is my vote going to make a difference? But if everybody starts to think that, then pretty soon those numbers are going to add up. And you know, as I said, you know, voting is just a first step, right? Once we vote, then, you know, we got to continue to advocate on November 4th and beyond. So, you know, the other thing is too, you can look at numbers. And if we look at the 2016 election, and if we look at a state like Wisconsin or Michigan, it was just, you know, a few tens of thousands of votes that made the difference in the Electoral College. So, you know, if we want to go about using nonviolent resistance and go about changing systems, we need to vote first. So I think for those apathetic folks, you know, it's a question of do they really want to see change? And the first thing you need to do is vote. And for those who just don't care and don't really care about change, well then, you know, we need to educate them, because it all starts again with education. And yes, as your professor reminds us, there is also a history of the National Guard being deployed against peaceful labor strikes. It shows that our government is at least sometimes willing to utilize force when they can get away with it. Again, that's true. We saw that. Perhaps you looked at the Kent State massacre in my home state of Ohio in the 1970s, where there were students gunned down by the National Guard. There was a protest against the Vietnam War that day. But some of the students weren't even, they were just walking to class, and 4 died, if I remember correctly. So yes, again, it's certainly our government, unfortunately, will use force in circumstances like that, and it's appalling. And yeah, that was an instance under a President Nixon where they could get away with it, just like under a President Trump, they can get away with it, even though they shouldn't. Okay. In today's hyperpolarized society, how do you communicate and engage with those who might oppose your movement? That's a great question. So, as we say at the Franciscan Action Network, there are many branches to the Franciscan family tree. And with those many branches, there's also many opinions about all sorts of different topics. And again, just like there might be some apathetic folks out there, there might be people, and they might be people of faith, they might be fan members, they might not be, that don't particularly care about a particular issue, or they might disagree. And again, that's okay. Not everyone is going to agree with us. But all we can do is to hope that we educate them, right? I need to get my fan members who don't believe in climate change, or my Franciscan brethren and sisters and Franciscan-hearted individuals. I need to get them copies of Laudato Si, because clearly that means that we have more work to do. And if at the end of the day, if I give them that copy of the papal encyclical, they still don't agree, I can at least say I've tried, and that's okay. It's not everyone's always going to agree with us, and we just have to find those folks, the 100 million or so who didn't vote, and the first step is to making sure we mobilize, because it's all about, if we're talking strictly in an election sense, if I'm putting on my political science hat, it's about turnout, turnout, turnout. So text those 5 friends, use those apps that can help you text strangers, and let's mobilize and get out the vote. Oh, another great question from your professor. So I co-facilitate a coalition. Yes, I do. The Faithful Democracy Coalition, a network of 55 organizations at FAN. How do I manage the plurality of opinions and approaches as well as egos? Well, here's the thing. Even people of faith, even advocates, they have egos too, right? And that can be a challenge. And that's a type of conflict resolution. That's a type of nonviolent resistance where it's interpersonal, and it can be a challenge, right? Perhaps you've talked about where sometimes in compromise, it can leave people dissatisfied, because it doesn't always, no one essentially gets what they want in compromise. And I've been in spaces where, I've been the only faith voice in the room, and sometimes folks look to me, and I jokingly say, well, let me speak on behalf of all faith people, knowing that I can't really do that. There's also been instances where I've had people of faith say to me, well, how do you go to all those coalition meetings, like you're part of the People's Climate Movement, like how did you do that? And like I just showed up, right? I just got on the email list, and I went to the meeting, and they put me in charge of something. So, and that's you got to have a willingness to be able to just show up and do what you can. But yeah, often you're going to have egos, and you're going to have disagreements, and that's it. That happens in a movement. But if you have a shared mission, and you have shared goals, you would hope that folks around the table can put their egos aside for the betterment of the movement. Do we have any other questions? Otherwise, there's a couple more I wanted to get to, but I also didn't want to just keep talking. So hopefully if others have questions, you can include them in the chat. I think it's really important to hear as many voices as possible. So what tactics do you engage in as an organization? How do you choose your tactics? What are some considerations? That's a good question, because certainly in our pandemic world, our tactics have had to change, right? It's harder to gather and stage a mass protest. Certainly those are being done, but you have to do that safely. Excuse me. And so that means that, you saw our video. That means doing more things like that online, doing campaigns that raise awareness for individuals through Zoom. We're holding trainings on Zoom and showing people how to pick up that phone and call their senators and representatives. So, I have been arrested for civil disobedience in the past, but that's not a tactic that I've used lately, and certainly in a pandemic, that's not really as feasible. So it's often for us as such a small organization, it's about capacity. It's what can we do in that moment. It's, can we show up at a protest and take pictures and put it on our social media? That's probably something we can do. Can we issue a press release? Can we speak at that event? Maybe not. That's going to take more capacity, and it's a question of organizational capacity, but that again speaks to individual capacity, and it's a question of what can you do as an individual, and sometimes that changes. So how do you organize? How do you get people involved? We have an email list. We have social media channels, and we send out a weekly e-newsletter, and we really try to build relationships with Franciscans and Franciscan-hearted individuals. It's all about building relationships. So if you're wondering, well, how do I organize? It's about building relationships. Right now that you can't necessarily go have a cup of coffee with someone. Maybe if you sit outside and sit 6 feet away, but it's about building those individual relationships, and then together you can build a movement, or get connected to those in your community who are already building, and that's important. Okay, some additional questions, and I will just keep answering these unless. Why do I use the term Franciscan-hearted individual? Thank you for that question. When I talk about a Franciscan, I mean a professed Franciscan. So someone who's a follower of St. Francis, perhaps you heard of that guy, or, he's that saint, he's known for talking to animals, and maybe he's a stone figure in your bird bath, but he was a 12th century saint who started the Franciscan priests, well, to keep it simply, even though he didn't intend to start an order of priests, but that's what ended up happening. And then his companion, St. Clare, started the Poor Clares, the nuns that are in the convent. And so when I say Franciscan-hearted individuals, I mean those folks that aren't priests or nuns, that follow the teachings of nonviolence and of the love of animals and of the earth and of our neighbors that St. Francis taught. So that's what I mean by Franciscan-hearted individual. Since I'm not a professed Franciscan, I'm not a priest, I say that I'm a Franciscan-hearted individual. So speaking of, how does faith or morality play into your choice to engage in nonviolent action? Well, for me as a Christian and as a Franciscan-hearted individual, I'll just keep saying it. That was a big motivator for me, to try to live a nonviolent life and to engage in nonviolent action. But certainly some of you might be people of faith, you might not be. That's okay. Certainly we have similar principles that we would agree upon, right? I'm advocate for nonviolence, and to also have equality and justice for all people. And that's a belief that's guided by my faith, but it's certainly not a belief that only people of faith have. So how do you choose which issues to address when there's so many prominent social justice issues in our society? Well, that can be hard, right? I've talked about, I've worked on climate issues, I've worked on immigration and on good governance, voting rights, campaign finance, and certainly it's you know, we got to stay true to our mission as an organization, but it's also what the moment calls for. And you know, for FAN, we decided that the moment called for creating that video and trying to encourage folks to vote their Franciscan values. And that's ultimately how we decided it. In our age of a Trump administration, when the house is on fire, we're playing whack-a-mole, it can be harder to plan, and it can be harder to pick a certain issue, and it can feel overwhelming. But we do what we can with limited resources. In my experience, what are some of the strengths of nonviolence? What are some of the weaknesses? So it can be a challenge, right? To try to engage nonviolently. Perhaps when the police or the National Guard are provoking protesters, perhaps there are protesters who are out on the street and they're not engaging in nonviolence. I was at a immigration rally once, and I heard a speaker say that, you know, if necessary, maybe people need to arm themselves. And that, I understood why that person was saying that, because certainly we've seen that violence can happen by the government. So potentially people would want to arm themselves, but that's not something I subscribe to, right? And it can be a challenge to try to live a nonviolent life when things out in the world are getting scarier. I understand that. And in some ways that's a weakness when others around you are promoting a different message, right? And they might not believe in nonviolence. But I think that's also a strength, because it's, you know, you have people throughout history that you can lean on as examples of nonviolence, but you have to recognize that, you know, it might require a sacrifice. That's for certain. And it's living a nonviolent life isn't for the faint of heart. Well, does anybody have any other questions? I can keep answering some additional ones, but I feel like I've just talked the whole way through, and you're probably sick of hearing my voice. I think we're doing pretty good for time. I may have gone a little over. Getting a thumbs up. I would love to hear, again, I'm so excited to hear about that you appreciated the video and found it powerful and inspiring. Would love to hear a little bit about what you thought about what I just said and what that means for the future going forward. You know, how can you all participate in the nonviolent resistance? You can just give me a word or phrase. I'd love to hear some ideas about maybe what this conversation sparked inside of you. Well, I'm not getting any reactions. So, okay, there we go. Persistence and creative solutions. Yes, I'm glad to hear it. It's all about being creative and, yes, being persistent, because you know, we're not going to achieve equality and justice for everyone tomorrow, right? And we're not going to achieve it after the election's over. That's, our work is just beginning. Yes, I do have a commitment to my cause and values, and yes, thinking big picture while taking small steps. That is a great one. Thank you. That's, yes, thinking strategically and trying to push the ball forward. Turnout, that is very important on November 3rd. Make a plan, so you can safely and securely vote. You really like how I gave you the ways that you can use nonviolence on a day-to-day basis. I'm glad to hear that. The validation of being socially aware. Yes, I'm glad to hear that you are socially aware Education is the best tool. Yes, again, it's an important first step before we can advocate. Wonderful. I'm so glad to hear it. Well, thank you all so much. I really appreciate your feedback, and I'm glad to hear that you got so much out of this. Yes, start with small goals. Have faith in people and that they can change. That is very true. Sometimes it's hard, but we do have to have faith in one another and you know, trust our neighbors. Yeah, and we need to listen, right? And sometimes opinions and perspectives are different, and that's okay. Yes, it is very hard. And sometimes that might mean, you know, hearing another person's opinion and then saying, that was nice having a conversation with you. Have a nice day. But please, you know, connect with us at the Franciscan Action Network. Our website is right there, franciscanaction.org. We're on Instagram, we're on Twitter, FranciscanNet. Feel free to send me a message, jason@franciscanaction.org. And there I am on LinkedIn and Twitter. Again, thank you so much, everyone. It's been a great pleasure to speak with you all today.